The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council stretched high above, its crystal dome showing the endless sea of stars beyond. At the massive round table, 11 fierce-looking alien leaders sat straight and proud. They were the galaxy's strongest warriors, each representing species that had conquered worlds and won great battles. And then there was the human representative. Captain Tom Reed sat quietly in his observer's chair, slightly behind the main table. Unlike the others, he wore a simple blue uniform with safety stripes that glowed softly in the dim light. While the warrior races wore their battle scars like medals, Tom's uniform bore only safety certification patches. The council speaker, a tall being with golden scales, stood up. His voice boomed across the hall. The threat we face is unlike anything in our recorded history. The Star Hunters have awakened. Screens lit up around the room, showing massive shapes moving through space. They looked like giant shadows, each one bigger than a battleship, eating everything in their path. Stars dimmed as they passed. 3 colony worlds have already gone dark, the speaker continued. Our strongest warships haven't returned from their missions. We must act now. The warrior representatives pounded their fists on the table. The one from the Fire Claws, a race of cat-like warriors, jumped up. Send in our elite forces. We'll show these beasts true power. Tom watched as, one by one, the council members made big promises. They talked about their mighty weapons, their brave warriors, and their past victories. But he noticed something they all missed. Every screen showing the Star Hunters revealed the same pattern. The creatures moved in specific ways, following paths that nobody else seemed to notice. The Blade Masters will lead the attack, shouted one representative. We'll strike at their hearts. The Steel Wings will darken the stars with our war fleets, yelled another. Tom typed quiet notes into his tablet, marking the movement patterns he saw. He knew speaking up would only get him laughed at. Again. Last time he suggested studying a threat before fighting it. The council had called humans space cowards for 2 whole days. But then the reports started coming in. The Fireclaw fleet, destroyed. No survivors. Blade Master attack force, gone. Steel Wing Armada, lost in seconds. The mighty warriors fell silent. Their best weapons, their strongest ships, their bravest fighters, all gone. The golden-scaled speaker looked older now, his scales dulled with worry. Perhaps, he said slowly, we should consider other options. Tom felt all eyes turn to him. He didn't want to speak up, but now they were finally ready to listen. Years of human space safety training had taught him. Understand first, act second. I've been watching the Star Hunters' movements, he said quietly. The council members leaned in to hear him. They follow patterns. They're not just attacking randomly. Look here. He sent his notes to the main screen. They avoid certain areas completely, he continued. They change direction near specific types of stars. They're not mindless killers. They're following rules we don't understand yet. Rules. The Fireclaw representative spat the word. They're beasts. Every animal on Earth follows rules, Tom explained. Even the most dangerous ones. We learn to survive by understanding those rules first. Maybe instead of fighting these Star Hunters, we need to study them. The council chamber erupted in angry shouts. Cowards talk. Typical human weakness. We need action, not studies. The speaker raised his hand for silence. He looked at the screen showing more fleets being destroyed, more worlds going dark. Then he looked at Tom's careful notes and patterns. The warrior's way has failed, he said heavily. Perhaps it is time to try the coward's way. Tom stood up straight. Give me 2 weeks with a research team. Let us observe and understand. If we fail, you can go back to attacking. But if we succeed, we might save a lot of lives. The speaker nodded slowly. 2 weeks, human. Show us what your careful ways can do. As Tom left the chamber, he heard the warriors muttering about human cowardice. But for the first time, Some of them sounded almost hopeful about it. Sometimes, Tom thought, it takes more courage to step back and think than to rush in with guns blazing. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was about to learn that lesson too. Tom Reed walked through the observation deck of his ship, the Earth vessel Safety First. Unlike the warships of other races, with their gleaming weapons and battle armor, his ship looked plain. Its hull was painted with bright safety stripes, and every corridor had at least 3 emergency exits. The crew worked quietly at their stations, each wearing the same safety-striped uniforms. On their screens, the Star Hunters moved through space like giant shadows. "Captain," called out Jack, his science officer, "I've compiled the safety reports from the failed attacks." Tom moved to Jack's station, where dozens of data streams flowed across the screen. Other races might have seen boring numbers, but to human eyes trained in risk assessment, each piece of data told a story. "Look at this," Jack pointed. Every time the warrior races attacked, the Star Hunters changed their behavior, but not randomly. Tom nodded. "They're responding to threats like animals do. When you corner a wild animal, it fights harder," Jack finished. "Basic Earth survival training." The ship's intercom crackled. "Captain, the Council representatives are here for their inspection." Tom sighed. He knew what was coming, more mockery about human caution. Walking to the meeting room, he straightened his uniform, making sure all his safety certificates were visible. Inside, 3 alien warriors stood tall. The Fire Claw representative's fur bristled with impatience. The Steel Wing's metal feathers clinked as she paced. The golden-scaled speaker watched everything with narrow eyes. "Show us your progress, human," the speaker demanded. Tom brought up the observation data on the room's screens. "We've been tracking their movements for 3 days now. See these patterns? They're following specific space currents, like fish in a river." "Fish," the Fire Claw growled. "We're losing worlds while you watch space fish." "Understanding saves lives," Tom said firmly. "Look here. Every time your warriors attacked, the Star Hunters became more aggressive. But when we just observe." He showed them footage of a research probe quietly following a Star Hunter. The massive creature barely seemed to notice it. "Cowardice." The Steel Wing snapped. "You're just afraid to fight." "Yes," Tom said simply. Everyone fell silent, surprised by his honest answer. "We are afraid. Fear kept our ancestors alive on Earth. Fear made us careful. Fear taught us to study dangerous animals instead of just fighting them." He switched the display to show more data. "We've learned more in 3 days of careful watching than in weeks of battles. The Star Hunters avoid certain types of radiation. They never enter areas with specific magnetic fields. They're not invincible. They have rules they must follow." The speaker leaned forward, his scales shifting colors as he thought. "Rules can be used against them." "Exactly," Tom said. "But we need more time to understand all the rules. Every time someone attacks them, it disrupts our observations and makes them more aggressive." The Fire Claw paced the room. "How can you be so calm? So careful? Don't you feel the urge to fight?" Tom thought about Earth's history, about all the lessons humans had learned the hard way. On Earth, we have a saying: "The bravest person isn't the one who's never afraid. It's the one who's afraid but does what needs to be done anyway." He showed them more data. Right now, being brave means being patient. It means studying instead of fighting. It means being called cowards if that's what it takes to save lives. The alien warriors looked uncomfortable, but they couldn't argue with the results. The human way might be slower, might look like cowardice to their eyes, but it was working. "You have 4 more days," the speaker said finally. "Show us that your careful way can do more than just watch." After they left, Tom returned to the observation deck. On the screens, the Star Hunters moved through space, following their mysterious patterns. Somewhere in those movements was the key to saving the galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, it would take human cowardice to find it. "Keep recording everything," he told his crew. "Every detail matters." Because that was the human way. Careful, thorough, and determined to understand. Even if others called it cowardice, Tom knew the truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take a step back and think. The emergency alert woke Tom from his short rest period. Red lights flashed through the Earth vessel safety first as he rushed to the bridge. "Status report," he called out, taking his seat. "The Blood Knights launched an attack against the Star Hunters," Jack replied, his fingers flying over his console. They didn't wait for our research to finish. On the main screen, Tom watched as the proud warships of the Blood Knights, one of the most powerful warrior races, moved toward a cluster of Star Hunters. Their ships glowed with weapon energy, looking like angry stars. "They're going to make things worse," Tom muttered. "Get me the Council channel." But it was too late. The Blood Knights opened fire, their weapons lighting up space. For a moment, it seemed impressive, until the Star Hunters responded. The massive shadow creatures moved with surprising speed. They didn't just attack the Blood Knight ships, they changed their whole pattern. Where before they moved in predictable lines, now they spread out, becoming more aggressive. "Captain," called out Mary from the sensor station, "the Star Hunters are changing course. They're heading toward populated systems." Tom watched as the mighty Blood Knight fleet disappeared into the darkness. Another warrior race's best efforts had failed. But worse, their attack had made the Star Hunters more dangerous. "Emergency Council meeting in 10 minutes, the intercom announced. When Tom entered the council chamber this time, the mood was different. The warrior races didn't stand proud anymore. The Blood Knight representative's seat was empty. Their entire fleet was gone. "Our strongest weapons do nothing," the speaker said, his golden scales dull with defeat. "Our bravest warriors fall before them. We are running out of options." Tom stood up. He knew this was his chance, maybe his only chance, to make them understand. "Let me show you what we've learned," he said, connecting his tablet to the main display. "Every time someone attacks the Star Hunters, they change their behavior. But it's not random." He showed them the data his team had collected. "Look here, they follow energy patterns in space, like rivers we can't see. When we attack them, we push them out of these patterns. That's when they become dangerous. So we should do nothing." The Fire Claw representative growled. "Just watch them destroy everything." "No," Tom said. "We should do something smart instead of just attacking. My team has mapped their movement patterns. We've studied their reactions. We know what they avoid and what attracts them." He brought up more screens showing complex data patterns. "We can use this knowledge. Instead of fighting them, we can guide them. Like shepherds guiding a flock." The council chamber erupted in angry shouts. "Shepherds? We are warriors. This is human weakness. We must fight." But the speaker raised his hand for silence. "Our warrior ways have failed," he said quietly. "All our strength, all our courage, has done nothing but make things worse." He turned to Tom. "Tell us your plan, human." Tom took a deep breath. "We use their own patterns against them. Create artificial energy fields they'll want to follow. Guide them away from populated systems. No fighting, no battles, just careful manipulation of their natural behavior." "It's too easy," someone shouted. "Too simple." "Sometimes," Tom replied, "the hardest thing is to do what looks easy, to hold back when you want to fight, to think when you want to act." The speaker studied the data on the screens. The patterns were clear now. Every attack had made things worse, while careful observation had revealed useful information. "How long?" the speaker asked. 3 days to set up the energy fields," Tom answered. "Then we'll know if it works." The speaker looked around the chamber at the representatives of the galaxy's proudest warrior races. Many seats were empty now, their mighty fleets destroyed. 3 days, he agreed. "Show us what human courage looks like." As Tom left the chamber, he heard the warriors talking quietly among themselves. They still used words like coward and weak, but now these words sounded different, almost hopeful. Because sometimes the greatest courage isn't in fighting at all. Sometimes it's in knowing when not to fight, in being smart instead of strong. And maybe that was humanity's gift to the galaxy. The courage to be careful. The observation room of Earth vessel safety first had changed. What was once a quiet space now buzzed with activity. Scientists from 3 human ships worked together, their screens filled with data about the Star Hunters. Tom stood in the middle of it all, watching his team work. They had just 2 days left to prove their method could succeed where warrior races had failed. "Captain," called Jack, waving him over to a large display. "We found something interesting in their movement patterns." On the screen, several Star Hunters moved through space, their massive shadow-like forms following invisible paths. Jack pointed to certain spots where they changed direction. "See these turns? They always happen near dying stars," Jack explained. "They're attracted to specific types of radiation, but they avoid others completely." Mary joined them, carrying her tablet. "And look at this," she added, pulling up more data. "They communicate with each other using energy pulses. When one finds good feeding grounds, it signals the others." Tom watched the patterns play out on the screen. "So they're not just mindless hunters," he said. "They're social creatures with specific habits." "Exactly," Jack nodded. "And here's the really interesting part. They're territorial. Each group stays in its own space unless something pushes them out, like warrior ships attacking them." Tom finished the thought. The intercom crackled. "Captain, the council speaker is requesting an update." Tom straightened his safety-striped uniform and headed to the communication room. On the large screen, the speaker's golden scales looked dull with worry. "Show me what you've learned, human," the speaker said. Tom shared his team's findings, explaining about the Star Hunters' territorial nature and their attraction to certain types of stars. "They're not trying to destroy everything," he explained. "They're looking for specific feeding grounds. When we attack them, we push them out of their preferred territories. And they move into populated areas." The speaker understood. "But how does this help us?" "We can use their natural behaviors," Tom said. "Create artificial energy fields that match what they're looking for. Guide them away from our worlds and back to empty space." Just then, alarms blared through the ship. Mary rushed in. "Captain, 3 Star Hunters just changed course. They're heading toward the bright star colonies." The speaker's scales rippled with fear. "Those colonies hold millions of people. You must do something." Tom thought quickly. This was a chance to test their theory. "Jack, can we set up energy beacons near the dying star in Sector 7? "Yes, but—" Jack hesitated. "We've never tested them. It might make things worse." "Sometimes you have to be brave enough to test your ideas," Tom said. "Do it." They watched as human ships moved into position, carefully staying out of the Star Hunter's path. The ships activated special devices, creating energy fields that mimicked dying stars. At first, nothing happened. The Star Hunters kept moving toward the colonies. Tom felt sweat on his forehead, but he stayed calm. "Wait," he said. "Give them time to notice." Then, slowly, the massive creatures began to turn. Like fish following a current, they moved toward the artificial energy fields, away from the populated worlds. "It's working," Mary whispered. The speaker leaned forward in his screen. "Remarkable. You turned them without firing a single shot." "Understanding is better than fighting," Tom said. "But this is just a small test. We need to set up more beacons, create safe paths for them to follow far from our worlds." "How many beacons do you need?" the speaker asked. "At least 50, spread across key points in space." The speaker nodded. "You'll have them. The warrior races may not understand your methods, but we cannot argue with results." After the call ended, Tom looked at his team. "Good work, everyone. But we're not done yet. We need to map out every beacon position perfectly. One mistake could send the Star Hunters in the wrong direction." His crew nodded, returning to their work with renewed energy. They had proven that human caution and study could succeed where warrior strength had failed. Now they just had to turn that small success into a galaxy-wide solution. Because sometimes the biggest victories come not from fighting, but from taking the time to understand. The entire council chamber watched in silence as a fleet of human ships moved through space. Unlike the warships that had come before, these vessels carried no weapons. Instead, they were loaded with energy beacons designed to guide the Star Hunters. Tom stood at the command center on Earth Vessel Safety First, coordinating the operation. "All ships report in," he ordered. One by one, the human captains responded. Their ships were spread across a huge area of space, ready to place the beacons that would create a safe path for the Star Hunters. "Remember," Tom said to everyone, "slow and steady. No sudden movements. Place the beacons exactly where planned." The Fireclaw representative watched from the council chamber, his fur bristling with impatience. "This is taking too long. The Star Hunters could attack at any moment." "Patience," the speaker replied, his golden scales shimmering with nervous energy. "Let the humans work their way." On the main screen, they could see the Star Hunters in the distance, massive shadows moving through space. More than 50 of them now, gathered in a huge group that could destroy entire star systems. "First beacon line is ready," Jack reported from his station. "Starting activation sequence." One by one, the energy beacons came to life, creating a path of artificial radiation that mimicked the Star Hunters' preferred feeding grounds. The council members leaned forward, watching. "They're not moving," the Steel Wing representative said. "Your plan has failed." But Tom remained calm. "Wait," he said. "They need time to sense the energy pattern. Rushing them will only make things worse." Minutes passed. The tension in both the ship and the council chamber grew. Then, finally, one of the Star Hunters turned slightly toward the beacon path. "Movement detected," Mary called out. "First group is changing course." They watched as the massive creatures slowly began to follow the artificial energy path. Like a river of shadows, they flowed along the route the humans had created. "Second beacon line. Activate," Tom ordered. More beacons lit up, extending the path further into empty space, away from populated systems. The Star Hunters followed, drawn by the familiar energy patterns. But then something went wrong. "Captain," Jack shouted, "Beacon 23 is failing. Power fluctuation." Tom's heart raced, but his voice remained steady. "Backup power to Beacon 23. Prepare emergency replacements." The beacon flickered, its energy field weakening. The Star Hunters nearest to it began to drift off course, moving toward a populated sector. "We must attack," the Fireclaw representative shouted, while they're confused. "No," Tom said firmly. "That will only make them scatter. Give us 2 minutes to fix this." He turned to his crew. "Reroute power from beacons 22 and 24. Create a bridge over the gap." His crew worked quickly, carefully adjusting power levels. The failing beacon flickered again, but the energy field held. The Star Hunters paused, then slowly returned to their planned course. "Energy bridge stable," Jack reported. "They're back on track." A collective sigh of relief went through both the ship and the council chamber. The human plan was working. Slowly but surely, the Star Hunters were being guided away from populated space. "Final beacon line," Tom ordered. "Let's finish this." The last set of beacons activated, completing the path that would lead the Star Hunters to a remote sector full of dying stars. Their perfect feeding ground. "Look at them move," the speaker said softly. "No violence, no destruction. Just guidance." Tom watched as the last Star Hunter entered the beacon path. Sometimes the best way to handle a dangerous situation is to create a safer alternative. The Fireclaw representative shook his head. "I still don't understand. How could such a cautious approach work where our bravest warriors failed?" "Because," Tom explained, "true bravery isn't about rushing in without fear. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you're afraid, even when others call you a coward for being careful. As the Star Hunters disappeared into deep space, following their new path to safer feeding grounds, the council chamber fell silent. The warrior races watched as humanity's cowardly approach succeeded where their courage had failed. The speaker's scales shimmered with different colors as he spoke. Perhaps we all have something to learn about different kinds of courage. Success didn't last long. 3 days after guiding the Star Hunters to their new feeding grounds, every alarm on the Earth vessel's safety first started blaring. "Report," Tom called out as he rushed onto the bridge. "The beacon network is failing," Jack said, his face pale. "Power readings are dropping across the entire system." On the main screen, Tom watched as the carefully placed energy beacons began to flicker one by one. The artificial path they had created was breaking apart. "Get me the council, now," Tom ordered. The council chamber appeared on the screen. The speaker's golden scales had turned almost white with fear. "The Star Hunters are turning back," he said. "They're heading toward populated space again." "What happened?" the Fire Claw representative demanded. "Your cowardly plan has failed." Mary ran up to Tom's station, holding her tablet. "Captain, I found the problem. The Star Hunters, they're eating the energy from our beacons. We didn't expect them to feed on the artificial signals." Tom thought quickly. This was bad. The beacons were losing power faster than they could be recharged. Soon the entire path would collapse. "We need to fight," the Steel Wing representative shouted, "while we still have ships left." But Tom saw something in the data that others missed. "Look at their movement pattern," he said, pointing to his screen. "They're not attacking. They're following the last traces of our energy path, trying to find more food. Then they'll follow that path right to our worlds." The Fire Claw growled. "Not if we give them something better to follow," Tom said. He turned to his crew. "How many ships do we have in range?" 32 human vessels," Jack replied. "And how many warrior ships are left?" Tom asked the council. The speaker checked his data. 23 ships from various races. "But surely you don't mean to fight now." "No," Tom said. "I mean to feed them." The council chamber erupted in confusion, but Tom was already explaining his plan to his crew. "Every ship has emergency power cells," he said. "If we eject them in a specific pattern, their energy discharge will create a new path, one that leads even further into empty space." "But that would leave our ships with only backup power," Jack protested. "Sometimes being brave means taking a calculated risk," Tom replied. He turned to the council. "We'll need your ships too. Every power cell we can spare." The warrior races argued among themselves. Giving up power cells would leave their ships vulnerable. It went against everything they believed in. The speaker raised his hand for silence. "You ask us to make ourselves weak, to give up our power. I ask you to be brave in a different way," Tom answered. "To trust that sometimes giving up strength is the strongest thing you can do." Slowly, the warrior representatives nodded. One by one, they gave their agreement. "All ships prepare to eject power cells on my mark," Tom ordered. "Time them exactly as planned. We only get one chance at this." The remaining fleet moved into position. Human ships and warrior vessels worked together, preparing for a maneuver that went against all their training. "The Star Hunters are getting closer," Mary reported. 10 minutes until they reached the first populated system. "All ships ready," Jack announced. Tom took a deep breath. If he was wrong, they would be left nearly powerless in space, watching as the Star Hunters destroyed everything. "Begin power cell ejection," he ordered. Across space, ships began shooting out their power cells. Each cell burst with energy, creating a bright trail. The Star Hunters noticed immediately. "They're turning," Mary shouted. "They're following the new path." Everyone watched as the massive shadow creatures changed course, following the trail of energy into deep space. Further and further they went, away from populated systems. "It worked," the speaker said softly. Your human caution saved us all. Tom looked at his ship's power readings. They were running on backup systems now. Like all the other ships, they had made themselves vulnerable to save others. Sometimes, he said, true courage means being willing to give up your strength to find a better way. As they watched the Star Hunters disappear into the distance, human ships and warrior vessels floated together in the darkness, all equally powerless, all equally brave in their own way. 1 month after the Star Hunter crisis, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. The proud warrior banners were still there, but now they hung alongside new symbols, human safety signs, and scientific charts. Tom stood at the main podium, no longer in the observer's seat. His simple blue uniform with its safety stripes stood out among the warrior armor around him, but no one mocked it anymore. The Star Hunters have settled into their new feeding grounds, he reported, showing the latest data on the main screen. They're staying in the areas we guided them to, far from any populated systems. The speaker's golden scales shimmered with approval. And the emergency power cells we sacrificed. All ships have been restored to full power, Tom answered. The rescue operation went smoothly, exactly as our safety protocols predicted it would. The Fire Claw representative stood up. His fur was neater now, less bristled with constant aggression. I still don't fully understand, he said. How did you know giving up our power would work? Tom switched the display to show the research data. On Earth, we learned the hard way that the strongest solution isn't always the best one. Our ancestors faced many dangerous animals. The ones who survived weren't the strongest fighters. They were the ones who learned to understand their enemies. But you took such a big risk, the Steel Wing representative added. Leaving all our ships on backup power, wasn't that dangerous? Of course it was dangerous, Tom smiled. Being careful doesn't mean never taking risks. It means taking the right risks, at the right time, for the right reasons. The speaker rose from his seat, his scales changing to formal colors. The Council has made a decision, he announced. Humanity will no longer hold observer status. You will become full members of the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities. The chamber filled with approving sounds, not the war cries of before, but thoughtful nods and respectful gestures. Furthermore, the speaker continued, we request that humans leave a new council department, one focused on studying and understanding the dangers we face before we try to fight them. Tom looked at his fellow humans in the chamber. Their careful ways, once mocked as cowardice, were now being recognized as wisdom. We accept, he said, but on one condition. The council members looked curious. Tom continued, we want to work with warriors from every race. Combine your bravery with our caution, your strength with our planning. You would trust us? The Fire Claw asked, after we called you cowards for so long. Trust isn't about what happened in the past, Tom replied. It's about what we choose to do now. You trusted us with your power cells when it mattered most. Now we trust you to help us build something new. The speaker nodded slowly. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson of all. True courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it roars like a warrior's battle cry. Sometimes it whispers like a scientist's careful observation. As the council session ended, Tom walked through the chamber's great hall. New screens were being installed, showing not just military data, but research information, safety protocols, and study results. Jack met him at the door. The first joint training session starts tomorrow, he said. Warriors and researchers working together. Are you sure about this? Tom watched as humans and aliens moved through the hall together. Warriors were learning to read safety protocols. Researchers were learning about battle tactics. Everyone was learning from each other. I'm sure, he said, because the bravest thing any of us can do is admit we have something to learn from others. Outside the window, space stretched endless and dark. Somewhere out there, the Star Hunters moved peacefully through their new feeding grounds. They were still dangerous, still powerful, but now they were understood. And understanding, Tom knew, was the first step toward true courage. Because sometimes the greatest strength lies not in fighting what you fear, but in taking the time to understand it. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not fearlessness, but the courage to be careful.